Hello! Welcome to another fantastic story. We have Tyrannosaurus Drip by Julia Donaldson. She's the lady who writes the stories like The Gruffalo and also The Smartest Giant in Town. She's written lots of stuff, but this time David Roberts is the illustrator, not Axel Scheffler. Let's go and have a look on the blurb to find out what the story's all about. This is the roaring, hooting monster success of the season, said the Times. And lots of other newspapers have said this very similar things. We've got the Telegraph, terrific and full of fun. Rollicks along very engrossingly, said the Independent. Who ever heard of a vegetarian Tyrannosaurus Rex? This little dinosaur is in the wrong nest. He may look small and weedy, but don't be fooled by his size. Tyrannosaurus Drip is brave and very clever. Let's go and find out about Tyrannosaurus Drip. Tyrannosaurus Drip by Julia Donaldson. In a swamp beside the river, where the land was thick with veg, lived a herd of duckbill dinosaurs who roamed to the water's edge. And they hooted, "Up with rivers!" and they hooted, "Up with reeds!" and they hooted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds." Now across the rushy river, on a hill the other side, lived a mean Tyrannosaurus with his grisly bride. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" and they shouted, "Up with war!" and they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur!" But the two Tyrannosauruses, so grisly, mean and grim, couldn't catch the duckbill dinosaurs because they couldn't swim. And they muttered, "Down with water!" and they muttered, "Down with wet!" and they muttered, "What a shame that bridges aren't invented yet." Now, a little Compsognathus, but for short we'll call her Comp, found a duckbill egg and stole it from the nest beside the swamp. And she swam with it and ran with it and murmured, "Clever me! And won't the baby Comps be thrilled with duckbill egg for, tea?" She dropped the egg in terror and went running for her life from the mean Tyrannosaurus and his grim, grisly wife. And the duckbill egg went rolling, and at last it came to rest in, of all unlikely places, the Tyrannosaurus's nest. Now, the mother T had great big jaws and great enormous legs, but her brain was rather little and she couldn't count her eggs. And she sang, "Hatch out my terrors with your scaly little scale, your scaly little tails, and your spiky little toothies and your scary little nails." A little eye. But out hatched babies 1 and 2, as perfect as can be. But Mother T was horrified by baby number 3. And she grumbled, he looks weedy." And she grumbled, he looks weak." And she grumbled, "What long arms, and look, his mouth is like a beak." "He just needs feeding up," said Dad, and gave the babe some meat. The first 2 gulped and guzzled, but the third refused to eat. And he said, "I'm really sorry." And he said, "I simply can't." And he said, "This meat looks horrible. I would rather eat a plant." "A plant!" yelled Mum in horror, and Dad said, "Get a grip!" His sisters found a name for him, Tyrannosaurus Drip. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" and they shouted, "Up with war!" and they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur!" Poor Tyrannosaurus Drip tried hard to sing along, but the others yelled, "You silly Drip, you've got the words all wrong." For he hooted, "Down with hunting!" and he hooted, "Down with war!" and he hooted, "Down with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur." Well, he would, wouldn't he? Drip's sisters soon grew big enough to hunt with Mum and Dad, but they turned on Drip and told him, "You're not fit enough to come." And he cried, they've gone without me. And he cried, Alackaday. And he cried, this doesn't feel like home. I'm going to run away. So he ran off to the river, where he saw a lovely sight, a herd of duckbill dinosaurs, all hooting with delight. And they hooted, up with rivers! And they hooted, up with reeds! And they hooted, up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds. As he stood there on the bank, a sudden urge took hold of him, and he jumped into the water and discovered he could swim. And the duckbills came to greet him by the rushy river's edge, and they hooted, nice to see you. And they hooted, have some veg. And Drip, who was delighted that they hadn't run away, ate bellyfuls of water weeds and played with them all day. Then he gazed into the river and asked them, who is that creature in the water? And they laughed and said, it's you. That night the lightning crackled and a storm blew down a tree, and it fell across the river, and the tees cried out, yippee! And they shouted, up with hunting! And they shouted, up with war! And they shouted, up with bellyfuls of duckbill dinosaur! Oh no! Drip's sisters stepped onto the bridge, but then began to frown, for there in front of them stood Drip, who yelled, look out! Look down! And they looked into the water, and they each let out a yelp, and one cried, water monsters! And the other one cried, help! Their mother scolded, nonsense! And she joined them on the tree. Then she looked into the water and exclaimed, good gracious me! The three of them stood trembling, and Dad said, get a grip! You're all of you as drippy as Tyrannosaurus Drip. He strode onto the bridge and scoffed, I bet there's nothing there. And then he looked into the water, and he jumped into the air. And how the duckbills hooted when he landed with a crash, and the tree bridge broke, and 4 tyrannosauruses went splash. And spluttering and climbing to the branches of the tree, they went whooshing down a waterfall and all the way to sea. And the duckbills hooted happily. They hooted, hip, 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 hooray for the heroic, one and only Duckbill Drip. Oh, what a hero. Well done, Drip. He saw off those mean, warmongering, nasty Tyrannosauruses. Well done, Drip. What a great story.